On today's episode of Let's Talk Drones, we are finally in our new space, and I am so excited about it because it gives me an opportunity to really focus in on what I love to do, and that's making content for drone pilots about drones and with drones. I'm excited to share the leveling up that I plan on doing in this new space. But that's not what today's video is about. Today's video is about the looming date for FAA enforcement of remote ID. What does this mean? And what does it mean for you? And what changes can you expect after this date has come and gone? All that and more right here on Let's Talk Drones. What's up? It's Chris, the Drone Geek, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Drones. Let's Talk Drones is brought to you by The Droning Company, the #1 online resource for commercial remote pilots worldwide. That's right, not just the United States anymore. They serve drone pilots worldwide. Check them out on their YouTube channel, The Droning Company. Lots of great content there, including a lot of content from yours truly. They've also got a fantastic website that is chock full of information and news in the world of commercial drones. So if you fly drones for a living, whether it's on a smaller scale or a larger scale, The Droning Company is the place to be. Make sure you sign up for a membership at thedroningcompany.com and check them out across all major social media platforms. Yeah, I am really excited to be in this new space. It's going to give me the ability to hone in on accomplishing the things that I want to accomplish this year. And one of those is taking my content from where it's been at quality-wise historically and leveling it up as much as I possibly can. And this is a great start for that, not just because I've got sort of a Peter McKinnon-esque aesthetic. I'm not really sold on what I've got set up lighting-wise here. And by no means am I trying to sell myself off as some sort of Peter McKinnon equivalent. That guy is like a god when it comes to photo and video. But what I am saying is this is a heck of a lot better than my bedroom. And I also don't have to juggle the obligations of home life with what I do professionally, which is make this content and fly drones. I can focus entirely while I'm here on what I love to do. Now, that's not what this video is about. The only reason I bring it up is because I want to thank you for your patience the past few weeks. Content's been a little bit lean here on the channel, and it's because I've been juggling all of my obligations in my drone career, and now this big move from my bedroom office to my new office. It's taken every bit of bandwidth that I've had, and I've been doing a lot of it alone. So it's been nice to get it done, and now I can look forward at the rest of the year and go, let's get it done. What we are here to talk about, though, not to waste any more of your time with all that nonsense, is remote ID. Now, if you're not familiar with what remote ID is, essentially think of it as a digital license plate. What this does is it tells anybody that's interested, not just law enforcement or the FAA, but anybody that has access to an app, like say the drone scanner app, they can see where your drone is at in the airspace now, they can see where it's been in terms of its flight operation, and they can see the location of the remote pilot as well. I've got some real problems with that particular piece of it because I don't think that the general public should be entitled to see where I'm standing as a drone pilot. Law enforcement, FAA, sure. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I don't typically do anything out of line or wrong or malicious with my drones anyway, so if they want to see where I'm standing, that's totally fine. But general public, that could cause a lot of safety problems when it comes to the actual remote pilot, especially remote pilots that are flying FPV. Yes, you should be flying with a BO, and that is obviously a regulation, but the fact is a lot of people don't. And if you've got goggles on, and you've got people that know where you're standing while you're flying your drone, that can obviously be problematic because you're not able to see what's in front of you to respond to it accordingly. So remote ID came into law in 2021, and then drone manufacturers had until 2022 to manufacture drones that were able to broadcast remote ID natively, meaning somebody that wanted to fly a drone could go and purchase it from Best Buy, Walmart, wherever, and then when they took it out to fly it, the drone would automatically broadcast the information the FAA required. That's not a big deal for manufacturers like DJI and Autel, which had been implementing hardware that was capable of broadcasting this information from the start. They just needed to send out a firmware update to their drones to make them compliant with the remote ID information needed by the FAA. But where it is a huge problem is for pre-built FPV companies and people that build their own drones on their own, whether it's a fixed wing, a single rotor, a quadcopter, whatever the case may be. If you're in the model aircraft or FPV section of the community, you obviously had a very big challenge on your hand in bringing your drones into compliance. Now, the overwhelming majority of those folks have chosen not to comply with remote ID, and more power to them. I won't tell you to do that here. I just don't want that that on my conscience if you get busted for flying without remote ID and you got the idea from me. But if you choose to do it under your own fruition, that's totally up to you. And I'm not going to tell you not to do it because, one thing I've learned over the past year or so since I made a video talking about my stance on remote ID is that historically speaking, non-compliance has been the way that we've gotten laws and rules changed here in the United States. So I don't think we should be putting anybody in danger. I don't think that we should be putting anybody in a position to fail. But at the same time, I can definitely see the value in just choosing not to comply, especially since the FAA up till this point has not really had the resources or the means to enforce remote ID. And that's sort of what brings us to our overarching point of today's video. On March 16th of 2024, that's just a few days away from the release of this video, the FAA will begin to enforce remote ID infractions. Whether it's not broadcasting correctly or not broadcasting at all, the FAA will be implementing enforcement action against those that are not complying with remote ID. Now, what does this look like? Because to this point, like I said, a big challenge that the FAA has had has been enforcing its own regulations. They don't have a dedicated enforcement arm, and the logistics to establish that are mind-blowingly complex. So I went to the FAA's website in search of answers for what this will look like after March 16th. And unfortunately, I found a whole lot of nothing. I just found that same vague blanket statement they've been giving about the consequences of flying outside of compliance. That is, you're going to face fines and potentially suspension or possible revocation of your drone pilot certificate. That's all I could find is that same idea rephrased 4 or 5 different times. It doesn't tell you anything about how they plan on enforcing it, how they plan on monitoring the airspace, or what they're going to do. I am reaching out to the FAA via email to ask them what this is going to look like to see if they can shed any light for us, and I'll give you an update in a follow-up video as to what this all could look like based upon their answer. But before we do that, I'm just going to give you my quick take and my prediction for what this is going to entail. Nothing. I don't think it's going to entail anything. What I think it's going to do is I think it's essentially going to bring to the table the possibility for the FAA to stack on more fines and more penalties against drone pilots that are caught flying their drone in a place or during a time that they're not supposed to be flying it, or drone pilots that encounter some sort of an incident while flying their drone, crashing it into a building, a vehicle, a person, whatever the case may be. It's going to be one of those things that they don't really enforce unless something else happened and they have the ability to pile up on you to teach you a lesson. So if you're flying with remote ID, you're pretty clear no matter what happens to you in terms of that particular section of it. If you're not flying with remote ID and you're going to continue that trend of non-compliance, I would say you're not going to have the FAA knocking down your door, checking to see if you have flight logs of when you broadcasted remote ID and when you flew your drone, and if those things match up. And I don't think the FAA is going to have patrol cars for local and state law enforcement going around looking for drones on the drone scanner app, or looking for people flying drones that aren't showing up on the drone scanner app. I think that would be ridiculous and way too cumbersome. But what I do think is going to happen is if you're busted doing something you're not supposed to be doing, or you have some sort of an incident that was either within your control or outside of your control involving your drone, the FAA is going to be asking for that, and they're going to ask for the data associated to remote ID and what should have been recorded in that regard. So keep that in mind as you're flying, especially after March 16th. If you want to stay compliant, you have until March 16th to make sure that you're being compliant, because at that point, anything that might be reported to the FAA will probably be investigated. And if you're not broadcasting remote ID, and that's easily provable by the FAA, you're probably going to get slapped with some sort of a penalty. I don't mean to fearmonger. I really don't think in the grand scheme of things, anything's going to change here. If you talk to anybody at the FAA, I've seen several interviews in written form as well as video and audio form with FAA representatives, in particular Kevin Morris from the FAA, and they've all basically stated, look, you should have been following remote ID since 2023, September of 2023. We just aren't enforcing it until March of 2024. So that being said, you should have been flying with remote ID for the past 6 months. And if you haven't been, the question I have for you is, has anybody asked you about it? Seriously, like, it's not me trying to be funny. Like, has anybody asked you whether or not you're broadcasting remote ID? Overall, most law enforcement, local, state, they don't care, or they don't know enough about it to care. The FAA has no way of enforcing it anyway, And quite frankly, I don't think there are even that many Karens out there that know about remote ID and know enough to download the drone scanner app to look for drones that are flying in their area, or to reference the drone scanner app if they see people flying in their area that aren't broadcasting remote ID. There's just not enough knowledge and information out there about it to make it enforceable, at least easily enforceable. So word to the wise, if you don't want to get in trouble and you want to cover your ass, make sure all your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted, you got until March 16th to make sure you're broadcasting remote ID if you haven't already started that now. If you don't plan on being compliant and you're going to continue a pattern of non-compliance, I would say just be careful out there. Because if you have some sort of an incident or somebody reports you or something like that happens, you could face additional penalties and fines for flying without remote ID. What do you think of all this? Let me know down in the comments below. I'm interested to see what you have to say. If you liked this video, hit the thumbs up icon down below. Helps me out a lot. Helps get this video out into the algorithm to more viewers like yourself. And if you really liked this video, you love drone content made by drones, about drones, and for drone pilots, my friend, this is the channel for you. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And while you're at it, hit the bell icon too. You'll get a notification every time I post a new video. Until next time, I'm Chris the Drone Geek, and I am out of here. See ya.
Yo, what you say? Steady screaming, YOLO, rockin'.